Hey Dustin, wanted to give you some feedback here. Um, when I ran your code, well, first of all, I commented out your input line so I didn't have to keep waiting for enter. And then the idea was supposed to be that when either one of these conditions are true, that the game ends by itself. And then as soon as I start it, of course, the game doesn't end and it's in an infinite loop. And so I'll hit Control C. And as I start to look at your code, I'm looking at, it looks like you have some issues with your variables. For example, you keep printing out the same value here, so this value isn't changing, which brings my attention to, all right, well, you're trying to print out P1 and P2, um, and not sure what P1 and P2 is supposed to be because you've never given it another value except for 0. And so you're adding P1 total plus 0 constantly every round, so P1 and P2 are never changing. So don't know what you're trying to do with that one. I'm guessing you're trying to keep track of their scores and that you should be using this P1 total for the player 1 total score and the player 2 total score. And so if that's the, and, and, and that would make sense because that's your condition. So you're caught in an infinite loop because you never change P1 total. It's always staying at 0. And so what I think is your intentions were, instead of here P1 and P2, this is where you're keeping track of the player's score, which makes sense. But then maybe we should be using this as P1 and P2 because, in fact, what you're trying to say is whichever of those scores, whichever of those scores are not equal to 10, um, that's at least now you're changing your variable here. So that makes more sense in your condition. Um, so let's run that and see what we get this time. So now if we run it, uh, we should at least get to an ending, and we're not. So we've got something else going on in our player loop. So P1 equals, oh, plus equals, oh, this should be plus equals and not the other way around. So if we change that to plus equals, I believe that will change up our game. Let's give that a try and see what we get. And now we get a loop. So now it makes sense because at least someone is getting to 10 and the game is ending by itself. We might need to change our condition a little bit. I don't know what the score is. I guess 9 to 9. So someone eventually, I guess this is your score. So that makes sense. So eventually player 2, I suppose, got the 10. Yeah, that makes sense. So now at least the logic's working. I probably would have said player 1 score is 9, player 2 score is 9. So these numbers had a little bit more meaning. But at least now we're getting out of our loop and the the variables are making a little bit more sense. So anyway, I hope this video helps get you out of the logic issue that you had going on.